Linda Spence vanished without a trace. One moment, she was the devoted daughter who called her mother every day, the bright young woman who never missed a Sunday dinner. The next, radio silence. No calls, no texts, no goodbyes. Her mother, Patricia, felt it in her bones. Something was terribly wrong. But what she didn't know, what no one could have imagined, was that Linda's disappearance wasn't just tragic. It was monstrous. When Patricia made that tearful plea to the public on June 14, 2011, "It's Father's Day this Sunday. Please let us know you're safe," her daughter had already endured a nightmare most people wouldn't dare picture. Linda had been missing for 2 months by then, and by the time the police began to unravel the truth, what they found didn't just contradict the image of a sweet, hard-working woman. It shattered it completely. Because behind Linda's polished smile and designer handbags was a trail of lies, fraud, and betrayal. She wasn't just a financial advisor. She wasn't just bankrupt. She was building an empire on deception, and she was very good at it. By the time investigators caught on, dozens of families, many from Glasgow's Chinese community, had been fleeced out of their life savings. Linda Spence didn't own those properties she promised them. She never did. Yet she wined and dined in the city's finest restaurants on their dime, until it all came crashing down. But what happened to her? Who made her disappear? And why? Was it revenge? A silencing? Or something far darker? This is True Crimes by Dominic, and in today's episode, we follow the chilling case of Linda Spence, a young woman who used charm as a weapon and paid the ultimate price. If stories like this pull you in like they do for us, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new drop. And let us know in the comments, do you think Linda's killer acted alone? Or was this a crime with more shadows than we've been told? It's Father's Day this Sunday. Please let us know you're safe. Please, if anyone knows anything, help us. Help Linda. The voice trembling in that heartbreaking video, recorded on June 14, 2011 in Glasgow, belonged to Patricia Spence. Her daughter, Linda, had vanished without a trace. And as the camera rolled, she was doing what any mother would, begging the world for answers. But what Patricia didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Linda had already endured something so horrific, so cruel, it's hard to even imagine. Linda disappeared on April 14, 2011. At first, it didn't raise too many alarms. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she was taking a break. But by May 13th, almost a full month later, her loved ones could no longer deny it. Linda was missing. And something felt deeply wrong. Let's rewind a bit. Linda Spence was only 24, but she'd already lived more lives than most. After spending years at a bank learning the ropes of finance, she decided she had what it took to go out on her own. Her first attempt at running a financial advice business didn't go well. She ended up bankrupt. But Linda was nothing if not ambitious. By the next year, her debts were wiped clean, and as if by fate, she came into a large inheritance. She saw it as her second shot, a new beginning. She launched Fraser Properties, a mortgage and letting agency in Glasgow. And this time, it seemed she'd struck gold. The business took off like wildfire. Linda snapped up 2 flats in one of Glasgow's most high-end neighborhoods. She was living the life she'd always dreamed of. Fast cars, luxury clothes, and champagne on ice, always within reach. She became a regular at exclusive nightclubs and posh restaurants. The tabs she picked up, always on her. But behind the glitz was a dangerous secret. Linda's empire wasn't built on hard work and clean deals. It was built on lies. Carefully crafted, dangerously convincing lies. See, Linda knew how to look trustworthy. She was sharp, charming, and incredibly persuasive. She had a way of making people believe in her, completely. That's how she pulled off one of her most audacious cons. She convinced nearly 30 families from Glasgow's Chinese community to invest their life savings, over £170,000, in a property development in Maryhill. There was just one problem. The development didn't exist. Linda had no stake in it. The money? She spent it on herself. Whenever people started asking questions, she had a story ready. A smile here, a promise there. She was a master manipulator, and for a while it worked. But then, she met Colin Coates. Colin was 41 and once upon a time had it all. A former IT specialist who made his fortune in London's fast-paced financial world, he was a millionaire before he hit his mid-30s. Wife, kids, big house, the full picture. But success didn't bring him peace. Instead, it cracked him wide open. Colin began drinking heavily. Drugs followed. The slide was brutal. He went from respected businessman to violent repeat offender. He assaulted his own sister-in-law. Then he attacked an elderly man who tried to intervene. He got probation, but far from scaring him straight, it seemed to unleash a darker side. One of his old friends would later say, he went from being an unassuming IT geek to a psycho gangster in 8 years. And there's video proof. In one disturbing clip from that era, Colin, dressed in drag, boasts about drug deals and talks coldly about abductions and extortion. The message was clear. Colin Coates was no longer someone to mess with. In 2010, Linda and Colin entered into a business deal. He gave her £85,000, everything he had left. Linda promised him a return of £131,000. On paper, it looked solid. But Linda had already blown the cash. Still, she kept up the performance. When Colin started getting suspicious, she claimed to be involved in a secret property development near Stansted Airport. She promised him over £1 million in profit if he just held on a little longer. She even added some flair, saying the return would come through Danish government bonds to avoid UK taxes. It worked for a while. But eventually Colin grew restless. So Linda pulled another rabbit out of her hat. She convinced a local printer to create fake Danish bonds. They looked legitimate, even though they were worth absolutely nothing. Colin was impressed, and again Linda bought herself time. But that illusion didn't last. The moment Colin realized he'd been conned, again, something in him snapped. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about pride, and Colin Coates was not the type to forgive humiliation. Meanwhile, Linda hadn't slowed down. She scammed another man, property developer John Glenn, out of £180,000. But Glenn wasn't quiet about it. He sent her text after text, each one more threatening than the last. One message read, "I'll cut off your fingers and chop off your head." Linda had spent years lying her way out of tight corners. But now, she was trapped. She'd crossed people who could and would hurt her. And to make matters worse, ghosts from her past were catching up. Back when she was just 17, working at a call center, she'd met a man named SoCal Zephy. He was an Albanian asylum seeker who had somehow managed to build a property empire worth nearly £500,000. He claimed to be a legit businessman, but in 2011, law enforcement launched a proceeds of crime case against him, freezing his assets on suspicion of drug dealing and fraud. Zephy was never charged, and he denied all accusations. But there's more. Allegedly, Linda and Zephy were married, though he denied that too. Still, Linda had business cards with the name Linda Zephy, so it's clear something was going on. And according to some reports, Zephy may have stolen a large sum of money from Linda, possibly the same money she needed to pay back Colin Coates. That December, Linda's longtime friend Amanda Robertson, who had worked with her, walked away. She was sick of the lies, the complaints, the scams. She had seen too much. Emails to shady contacts in Albania and the Arab world. Messages from Linda to Zephy filled with panic and fury. One message read, "I'm in deep because of the money you stole. It wasn't even mine." Another, "I can't go back to Glasgow until you return it. You don't know who that money belongs to." Linda spent Christmas 2010 in luxury, toasting champagne at a posh hotel. But that celebration would be her last. By New Year's, Frossier Properties had crumbled. The luxury lifestyle was gone, her funds dried up, her friends disappeared, and even her parents, who relied on her to pay their rent, found themselves homeless. She went from penthouses in Cristal to living on government benefits and pawning off jewelry, desperately trying to stay afloat. But the vultures were already circling, and Linda Spence had no idea just how much danger she was really in. After that encounter, Linda's demeanor began to shift subtly at first. then in ways too hard to ignore. Her mother, Patricia, was the first to notice. The daily phone calls didn't stop, but something in Linda's voice had changed. She sounded distant, emotionally shut off. Whenever Patricia suggested meeting up, Linda always had an excuse. When they did manage to meet, she seemed evasive, constantly glancing over her shoulder, dodging simple questions with vague answers. Something was wrong, and it was getting worse. Then came Wednesday, April 13th, 2011. Patricia Spencer's birthday. Linda showed up, but she wasn't the same. Patricia immediately sensed something heavy hanging over her daughter. Her shoulders were stiff, her eyes were nervous, like she was carrying a secret too dangerous to say aloud. She didn't stay long. Linda told her mother she needed to run a quick errand and promised she'd be back in half an hour. She never returned. No one knows exactly why Linda left so suddenly that night, but what's believed to have happened next would push this story into horrifying territory. The next day, Thursday, April 14th, Linda is thought to have driven herself to a house in Glasgow. That house belonged to Colin Coates, and he was waiting for her. But Colin wasn't alone. Beside him was Philip Wade, a 40-year-old known drug dealer, and more disturbingly, a drug debt enforcer. Wade had a reputation for settling scores with blood, and just like Coates, he had an old grudge against Linda. At some point, she'd scammed him too, taken money and vanished. The fact that Linda willingly drove herself there suggests she had a plan. Maybe she thought she could talk her way out of trouble, the way she had before. Maybe she believed she could charm, deceive, or reason her way through another confrontation. But Coates and Wade weren't in the mood for negotiations. They overpowered her, restrained her, and forced her into a car. That car took them to a second property, one that belonged to David Parker, a known drug addict. He and his housemate Paul Smith, another struggling addict, had agreed to let Coates use their flat for a few days. Whether they knew what was actually about to happen inside their home is still uncertain. Linda was dragged up to the attic. There, she was tied to a chair, and she would never leave it. They blindfolded her using glasses covered in thick black tape, making sure she couldn't see a thing. She wasn't allowed to stand, not even to use the bathroom. She was forced to sit in her own waste hour after hour, day after day. It was torture, and it was just beginning. Parker and Smith had been instructed to keep watch over her. Coates and Wade left, but when they returned, they brought with them what the court would later describe as a torture kit. Inside the bag, garden shears, a steam iron, surgical tape, a plastic bucket. David Parker would later tell police, "She was in a frightened state. When they put the hacksaw blades through my door, I realized it was high-duty serious." From downstairs, he and Smith could hear muffled cries, screams, thuds. And when Coates and Wade finally left again, Parker and Smith crept up to the attic. What they found was chilling. Linda was barely recognizable, her face swollen, bloodied, bruised. Cigarette burns marked her skin. Her body was deteriorating fast. But this wasn't a one-time incident. It was the beginning of a sick routine. Coates and Wade returned every single day. Each visit brought new horrors. They'd spend hours upstairs torturing her, while Parker and Smith remained below, trying to pretend they didn't hear the suffering just above their heads. After each session, Parker and Smith would bring Linda a cup of tea, maybe a bowl of soup. That was all they could manage, they claimed. They watched as her body and mind withered away. One day, her skin was scorched from burns caused by the hot steam iron. Another day, her toes were crushed with garden shears. They even sliced off the tip of her finger. Another time, they used a golf club to shatter both of her kneecaps. Every injury was a message. Tell us where the money is. But Linda couldn't. There was nothing left to give. Parker later said he wanted to help her. He thought if he could just convince Linda to say something, anything, maybe they'd stop. Maybe they'd let her go. But there was no escape. The money was gone. Her fate was sealed. And if you're wondering why no one reported her missing, why the police weren't involved sooner, it's because while Linda was tied up, alone and in agony, Colin Coates paid a visit to her parents. He lied. He claimed he had no idea where Linda was. But then, in the same breath, He made a veiled threat saying he had heavy contacts, and if they so much as thought about calling the police, those contacts would get them. Then he dropped another bombshell. Linda owed him £10,000. He demanded they hand over their caravan as payment. And terrified, feeling powerless, they did. And so, silence. Until 6 days later, April 20th. Linda's parents were heading out to the shops when the phone rang. It was Linda. Patricia picked up first and froze. The mix of shock and relief made it hard for her to speak. She quickly passed the phone to her husband. He later described Linda's voice as calm and composed. He asked where she was, but Linda dodged the question. She gave no details, no location. Before hanging up, she left them with a single, haunting promise. "I'll speak to you again soon." But she never did. Even now, no one really knows why Linda was allowed to make that phone call or how she managed to sound so calm. Some believe her captors forced her to do it, a sick attempt to stop her family from raising alarm or going to the police. By that time, Linda had already been held captive for nearly a week filled with daily violence, searing burns, brutal beatings, and the horrific loss of at least one of her fingers. At that point, she likely would have said anything to survive. There's a theory that Linda may have tried to sneak in a coded message during the call, something subtle that only her mother would pick up on, but heartbreakingly, her mother was unable to speak. So Linda ended up talking to her father, and he, tragically, interpreted her vague, guarded tone as just evasive. Not unusual for Linda, maybe, but in reality, it was a cry for help, one that no one could decipher in time. That phone call would be the last time Linda Spence's family ever heard her voice. Later that very day, Colin Coates returned to the house. This time, he came alone. David Parker, who was already there, noticed something instantly. Coates looked furious. No words, no hesitation, he went straight up to the attic. Moments later, the silence shattered. The house echoed with Linda's terrified screams. When Coates came back downstairs, he wasn't carrying a weapon or a threat. He was carrying Linda's severed thumb. He had stuffed it into his pocket like some twisted trophy. During the torture, Linda had apparently admitted to something that enraged Coates. She'd given part of the money she scammed from him to John Glenn, the very same man who'd once sent her violent threats. That admission flipped a switch in Coates. So with Linda's thumb in a plastic bag, Coates went to confront Glenn. The thumb wasn't just evidence, it was a message, a warning, and it worked. Faced with the gruesome proof, Glenn caved. Coates managed to extort some of the money back from him. Afterward, in one of the most disturbing details, Coates reportedly walked into Glenn's bathroom and flushed Linda's thumb down the toilet. But even with some of the money recovered, Coates wasn't done. He didn't release Linda. In fact, he and Wade escalated the torment. Their trips to the attic became routine, and each time the cruelty got worse. By April 27, 2011, Linda's condition was beyond horrific. Parker and Smith, the men whose house she was being kept in, were told to leave the property. Whatever happened next, Coates didn't want witnesses. At that point, Linda was in catastrophic shape. Her body was covered in severe burns. Several of her fingers and toes had been either crushed or snipped off using garden shears. Both of her kneecaps had been shattered. For almost 2 full weeks, she'd been tied to a metal chair in a sitting position, unable to move, soaked in her own waste. That chair, that attic, it became her prison, her torture chamber. And then came April 28th. That morning, Coates allegedly brought Linda into the bathroom. What he did next was only revealed later when he bragged about it to a fellow inmate. According to Coates, he covered Linda's nose with his hand while her mouth remained sealed shut with black tape. She suffocated slowly. Once she was dead, Coates did something even more chilling. He decapitated her. The next day, he and Wade tried to borrow a boat from a friend. They claimed that they had to get rid of something. The friend, sensing something was off, refused. So they found another way. What exactly happened to Linda's body remains a mystery. Coates later told fellow inmates that he had incinerated her remains in a furnace. But to this day, no evidence has ever confirmed that. What is certain, though, is that her body was never found. After her death, Coates, Wade, Parker, and Smith began what can only be described as a full-scale cover-up. Over the course of an entire month, they scrubbed the house down to its bones. Every piece of furniture gone, every carpet ripped out. They doused every surface with bleach, trying to erase every trace of what had happened. Police footage later showed the attic floorboards missing, removed completely. It was in that attic Linda had suffered and died. The boards had been stained with blood, soaked with bodily fluids, contaminated beyond repair, so they destroyed them. They even burned anything that might contain DNA evidence in the back garden. On May 13, 2011, Linda was finally reported missing. 1 month later, on June 14th, her mother Patricia made a heartbreaking public appeal on television, begging the public for any information about her daughter's whereabouts. Behind the scenes, the police were already closing in, but there was one major problem. Anytime Colin Coates' name came up, people went silent. Everyone was terrified of him. That silence finally broke on August 16th, when John Glenn, the man Coates had threatened with Linda's severed thumb, agreed to talk. Up until that point, Glenn had refused to cooperate with investigators. But something had changed. The day before, Coates had shown up at Glenn's home again. This time, he forced Glenn to strip naked and extorted even more money from him. That was the final straw. Terrified and humiliated, Glenn went to the police. From that moment on, the case began to unravel. Police quickly found David Parker and Paul Smith. Faced with the opportunity for reduced sentences, they agreed to tell everything. On October 28th, officers raided the house where Linda had been held. Forensic teams spent over a week combing through every inch of the property. They found almost nothing. Until in a bathroom corner, they discovered a small fragment of blood. It was tiny, but enough. DNA confirmed it was Linda's. They also found one of Colin Coates' fingerprints on the bathroom door handle. It was the only print left in the entire property. Everything else had been wiped clean. That lone fingerprint told prosecutors all they needed to know. A massive, calculated cleanup had taken place. When the trial began, more horrifying details came out. It was revealed that Coates had used threats to keep nearly every witness silent. That included Parker, Smith, and even Philip Wade, his partner in crime. The sentences were harsh, and rightly so. David Parker, who owned the house where Linda was held, was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months. Paul Smith got 11 years. Philip Wade, for his role in Linda's kidnapping and prolonged torture, was sentenced to 30 years. And Colin Coates, the architect of it all, received a life sentence, with a minimum of 33 years. One of the longest sentences ever handed down by a Scottish court. But even with that verdict, there was no true closure. Linda's body has never been recovered. Before her death, Linda's mother, Patricia, already battling terminal cancer, made one final plea to her daughter's killers. Linda was my only child. It would mean everything to me to be able to lay her to rest. Without her body, there can be no closure. But neither Coates nor Wade ever revealed where her remains were hidden. In a final statement, Linda's grieving parents thanked the police and prosecutors who had fought to bring justice. They said, "Linda was a warm, kind, and thoughtful daughter. She always had time for others. We miss her more than words can say." Thank you for watching this heartbreaking chapter on True Crimes by Dominic, a story that lingers in the mind long after it ends. Linda Spence's murder wasn't just a crime of violence. It was a brutal erasure of a young woman's voice, her future, and her dignity. And what makes it even more haunting is the silence that still surrounds her final resting place. Despite the convictions, despite the trial, despite her mother's dying wish to bring her home, Linda's body was never found, and those responsible have never told the truth about what they did with her remains. That silence, that cold refusal, is a final act of cruelty that continues to torture her loved ones to this day. It makes you wonder, what kind of person not only commits such horror but carries the secret of it to the grave? Is justice ever truly served when there's no body to bury, no closure, no grave to visit? I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Coates and Wade will ever confess? Or will Linda's story remain forever incomplete? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. If this case gripped you, there's more like it on True Crimes by Dominic. I uncover chilling, real-life mysteries and deliver new stories every 2 days, so make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Sharing this story might help someone out there see the signs or remember someone who needs to be remembered. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.